So, this will be an experiment. I will try to share some knowledge about how to run a bus in the Vagabond. I will just record my whole farming session, and then whenever I say something interesting, I'll try and cut it together into a concise video. I'll probably ramble a bunch anyways, but yeah, let's see what happens. So this is a Vagabond, it's a very good abyss ship. This is my fit. I have 220 autocannons in the top. A word on the autocannons, you would think that 425s would be better, but they aren't because they have worse tracking, and with a ambit extension rig the 220s have roughly the same projection, and they still use less power grid. So you would have to have a power grid rig here anyway. You might as well run with the 220s and take the better tracking. I have a auto-targeting system. If you have the power grid, which I don't, you could put a missile launcher here. Um, it's a little bit of extra DPS, but it's not really that important. Um, I tried a Nosferatu, but it doesn't seem to work on most enemies in the Abyss, so it got rid of that. The mid-slots are pretty much self-explanatory. You need every single one of these modules, and I have every single one of them abyssal except for the multi-spectrum. This is an A-type. Um, there are fits out there that rely on two ancillary shield boosters instead of one proper shield booster. The advantage of those fits is that you technically don't need any capacitor, so you can ignore neutralizing enemies. But the downside is that you have to fumble around with your ancillary shield boosters, you have to keep overheating them to get more repairs out of them. And it's just a bunch of effort that I don't want to go through, so I have this significantly more expensive but also more stable and more convenient fit. Then the low slots are also pretty self-explanatory. I have two tracking enhancers and three gyro stabilizers. You can use a assault damage control instead. If you're inexperienced and you don't really know what you're doing quite yet, I would recommend an assault damage control. I have run quite a lot of Abyss, so I'm just choosing a second tracking enhancer to squeeze out every little bit of fall off out of my autocannons. Increasing your projection increases your effective DPS, which means you finish the Abyss faster, and so that's what I go for. You will need Barrage, Hail, and Fleet Fusion. I use Pyrolancia, I use whatever event drugs I can get, although I try to keep it cheap with the drugs, but they have a 4 hour runtime, so I mean I think it makes the run safer and faster. I'm just coping, but yeah. You also need improved drop for emergencies. If you end up running into lots of tracking disruption, you may not be able to punch through fast enough to reduce the amount of tracking disruption on the grid without the drop booster. This is why I run it. I also run Mind Flood. It saved my life at least once. These two are for emergencies. You don't use them all the time. But if you end up in a situation where your cap is under pressure or where you have lots of tracking disruption going on, you just eat them. This fit does not require blue pill for any room, but if you don't splurge as much as me on your tank, you may want to have a blue pill in your cargo as well for emergencies. Implants, uh, crystal, high grade crystal. This one is cheaper than similar implants, and then everything to increase your gun's damage. And then this one is just because it might come in useful if you eat the drop or blueprint, and there isn't anything else useful for slot 10. Anyway, alright, see you in the Abyss. Alright, so we have the Sancha wave. This is one of the few waves that you should not face tank with the Vagabond. And the reason isn't so much the damage. You have very high EM resistance, and these mostly do EM damage. But the devoted knights, if you come too close to them, they have very high neutralizers, and they have strong webbers, so you won't get back out, and they just might oh, lost some drones already. They just might newt you out. Yeah, a word on the drones there. The reason I lost a bunch is because warriors love to suicide out of bounds, especially when there's white clouds involved. If I wasn't distracted by talking, I would not have launched the warriors in the first place, because this is the white clouds and I are old friends, and I don't really like losing my drones to them, but it is what it is. So we are zipping around from extraction cache to extraction cache. I have a fairly good afterburner, and there's the white cloud. If neither were true, I would probably save one of the extraction caches and just go for the bioadaptive cache, and then once I've killed everything, I would just go to the next room quickly. But here I know that I have plenty of time. By the time I've killed all the small stuff and can focus on the knights, I will have long since looted all the stuff in the room. I use the auto-targeter sometimes for a cycle, just to not have to manually clicking on everything. And because we're running autocannons, we generally want to attack whatever is closest, because that's what we apply the most damage to. Let's see if I can lose the rest of my warriors as well. The Sancha sometimes switch to your drones, not very often, but if they do, the drones are as good as dead. Well, there you go. One of them is already nibbling on my drones, so I'm just pulling them back. In contrast of what you've seen in this video, you should only use your warriors really to support DPS on large enemies that don't switch to your drones, such as, for example, the Abyssal Overmind. I'm switching to Fusion because once these Sancha come close, they are a little hard to hit with hail. If they were a little bit bigger and a little bit slower, I'll be just using hail. Okay, so we try to stay away from the devoted knights, at least 15 or so kilometers, which isn't a problem right now, but I'm paying attention to how far the devoted knights are away from me, and if I come too close, I'll end up manually piloting and flying a little bit to the side to make sure they don't catch me and newt me out. Once the small stuff is done, you can kill one or two of the knights at range and then YOLO in on the last one. With my shield booster, this cloud is actually not very good for me. It's not a big deal usually unless you are already under heavy newt pressure, but it's better to stay out of them anyway. This is not a problem with ships that rely on medium shield boosters, but we're running a large, so it's better to stay away from these shield booster clouds. Okay, so I've killed all the small stuff. I'm in the process of finishing up one of the devoted knights. I will probably switch to hail to finish off the other two. Sometimes, in very rare circumstances, the devoted knights also switch on your drones and they will just one-shot them. There's not much you can do about it. Only Gila drones with their extra HP can reliably survive the sudden DPS. Generally speaking, if you can withstand the cap pressure as well as the DPS, you should just YOLO in and kill people, kill things as close up as possible. And that's the room. Before every room we reload to barrage, because that's the most likely ammo we will be able to do some damage with. Okay, what do we have? We have Vila Damavix. I have a special overview tab where I don't see drones, and we're going to kill the ghostings and tanglings first. Ghosting Damavix are a particular problem. If there's too many of them, they can reduce your fall off to the point where it's difficult to do enough damage to them, and if there's also tanglings on the grid, then you can't even kite them out. So we are killing the ghostings real quick. At this point I think, oh, there's only two. Two should not be a problem, so we're just switching to hail. This room you don't have to worry about anything except clearing it fast enough. If there's not too many ghosting and tangling Damavix on the grid, you're safe. Generally speaking, your tank should not be stressed, your cap should not be stressed. Oh, and of course, I'll demonstrate it here. You can't use the auto-targeter, unfortunately, because it'll target a bunch of the small stuff. I'm not using my warriors to pop the can because there's this little deviant automata suppressor, but the good news is that it also works on the Vila drones, so they get wrecked by it. It's not really relevant for the Vagabond unless you're struggling with tank, in which case you should be upgrading your tank anyway. But it's just one of these funny little things. Okay, I should have probably left up a couple of the ghosting Damavix because they aren't really dangerous in small numbers. I should have killed the tanglings first because they help me move faster and collect more of the extraction caches. In this room layout I probably will skip the cache that is 100 kilometers away. I could get it, but I'm not sure it's worth it from a is per hour perspective because I'll be slow bolting over a minute there and back. And as you can see, the enemies are almost dead. So we'll probably just pick up these two caches and then we'll go to the next room. Oh, and also one thing that if you're running the Vagabond, one thing you should do is put the fit into Python and take a look at which ammo falls off at which distance. So for this fit in particular, I know that about 21 kilometers is where all my ammo does the same damage. Above 21 I should be shooting barrage, and below 21 I should be shooting either fusion or hail, depending on whether I need the extra tracking from fusion. Okay, reloading to barrage and going to the next room. Okay, so this is an all drone room because I didn't see the drones immediately. So here we just reload to fusion immediately, especially if there's a bunch of fogcasters on the grid. They are very, very fast, so they will be on top of you anyway very quickly. And you need the extra tracking actually. If you don't have two tracking disruptors, tracking enhancers rather like I do, you might have to eat the drop booster in this room anyway, because these are small and fast and annoying, and you might not be able to hit them very well, even with 220s. I'm dropping my drones to pop the cache because I don't want to bother shooting it. These little drones also switch to your drones occasionally, so you have to pay attention to them. Like this little guy, for example. Okay, I'm done with most snare casters, so I can just use the auto-targeter at this point. Yeah, as you can see, I have trouble hitting the snare casters. If I had lost all my drones in the room before, I would probably eat my drop booster right now, just to make the room a little faster. So yeah, to reiterate, your warriors really love suiciding out of bounds, so be careful with sending them to shoot at extraction caches that are close to the boundary. You don't want to lose a bunch, because you might need them like I do here. Oh, I lost another one. Oh well. Okay, that was the drone frigate room. Like I said, your tracking might become an issue, especially if you're webbed down and you can't string out the drones behind you. One little trick I do is I orbit the gate instead of just sitting still. That typically reduces the transversal velocity just a little bit. Pulling drones, reloading barrage. We did this whole filament in about 15 minutes. If you see origin conduit, that means you're in the last room. I tend to forget which room I'm in, so that's what I'm looking out for. But then in the Vagabond, every room should take roughly the same amount of time. Okay, I've docked up and refilled my drones. What do we have here? Rodiva, Damavik, and Kikis. So we have a lot of Rodivas here. I guess we're killing the Kikis first. Again, ghosting enemies are what you should be focusing on usually, especially if there's also webbing enemies on the grid and you can't really kite out the ghostings to reduce their transversal. You might be in some trouble. This is a fairly easy room, ironically, because there are so many Rodivas, because that means there aren't that many of anything else. Oh, this guy keeps repairing me. It's not a big deal. I'm not worried about running out of time here. Actually, let me try and switch to the other one. Maybe we can snipe that one. Since there's only 2 ghostings, I'm not too worried. If this was 3 or 4, I might be... Oh, drone getting attacked. If this was 3 or 4 ghosting kikis, I might want to YOLO in and kill them quickly with hail instead of trying to collect all the loot. But in this case we are pretty safe. I'm wondering if I should switch to hail, but I know that the Rodivas are a little bit slow, so I'll probably end up kiting them as well. Keep using barrage for now. Actually no, let me switch. So I've switched to hail after all. For no particular reason. I know that the Triglavians are faster than me, but I also know that the Rodivas aren't very nimble, so they end up lagging behind as they are now. This isn't really important. This room isn't generally important, other than if you have a bunch of ghosting kikis. And we're switching back to barrage. Okay, so most of the kikis are dead. I'm just collecting the loot while killing the Rodivas. Like I said before, if your afterburner isn't quite as good as mine, you may not want to drone under attack again. You may not want to waste so much time collecting loot and instead just kill everything with hail and move to the next room. Okay. Cruisers galore. The upholders are the one that slow you the most. I'm gonna fly over to this extraction node. I won't even drop my drones here because I'm worried that... Is there a white cloud? No, it doesn't seem like it. Okay, let's pop this one with a white cloud with my drones. These cruisers do love killing your drones and they do quite a lot of damage, so I'm paying close attention to them. Also, they're in hail range. I should be switching. One little trick that many people don't know is you can control click on these symbols and then lock up whatever is applying this debuff to you. Pulling drones because a bunch of them have switched. You can sometimes use the drones as an emergency tackle clear because it is typically webbing and warp disrupting enemies that will switch on your drones, which means it'll give you a little bit of speed to get out from under some nasty effects if you need it. So the concept of ablative drones that you use to save your own life, is something you sometimes have to use in the Abyss, although of course you ideally are flying a fit that doesn't have to do that at all. But if you make a mistake or if you end up with a particularly nasty spawn, you can drop your drones not just to assist you with DPS, but also to maybe draw some of the enemy fire. Some NPCs really love switching to drones, angels for example. Although it has to be said that the angel room should not be a problem for the Vagabond, because obviously we're shooting mostly explosive, and in the Gamma Abyss you have an additional explosive resistance penalty, which means that the angels basically have 0 resistances and you should be able to kill them really quickly. One thing to note is that I have both the name and the type of enemies in my overview. That is specifically because the Scylla Tyrannos all have the same name, but depending on the type, they apply different effects to you. So the null warp ones are the ones that have warp disruptors. So they are warp scramblers rather. They're the ones that you pay very close attention to if you are running a micro warp drive fit. So as you can see, all the webbing and warp disrupting enemies are off grid, and that means that my drones aren't being switched on anymore. This is usually the case except with sleeper frigates. So if there were some, what are they called? No, Warns, Aegis I think they're called. Yeah, anyway, some small enemies will sometimes switch on your drones even though there is no webs and scrams on grid. These lucid cruisers are very slow compared to your own ship. I will sometimes even deliberately limit my speed or just sit still for a little bit to allow them to catch up, especially once I'm done looting the room. They don't have that much of HP. The neutralizers are only dangerous in large numbers and only if you aren't outrunning them. So if you happen to be webbed and you see that there's a bunch of sentinels and energy neutralizing drifter cruisers, you should probably kill the energy neutralizers first and then clear the webbing enemies. Okay, last room. It's Redivas, this time with drones. Um, I guess I can clear the drones first as long as they are far away. This is not scary in any way for the Vagabond. The only thing you have to really worry about is if, well, honestly, you don't have to worry about anything in this room. Depending on the room layout, it might be more efficient to get the biocache on the way to the next extraction caches. You just have to sort of look at the situation and figure out which way you should fly next. Let me drop the warriors against my better judgment. Pulling drones because they've been switched on. Putting them back out. Watching out for white clouds to make sure my warriors don't get murdered. And there it is. The white cloud was there even though it was very difficult to see. So I'm pulling my drones to make sure they don't YOLO out of bounds. This is a small problem with warriors in particular. They are so fast that they miss the chance to dock back on your ship. And usually the only thing you can do is just try to fly out of the white cloud. Okay, what do we have here? It's another Rodiva room. This time only one ghosting Kiki, so it's even easier. Where's our... Okay, there's a white cloud on the way to the extraction cache, which means it's going to go even faster. Once I've collected all the loot, I will just YOLO in on top of the enemies and start killing them with hail. Honestly, I'll just switch to hail and kill the frigates. Not launching the warriors because I know they will just kill themselves. This tracking pylon also helps kill the Damavix quickly, although it would work just fine without it because Striglavians have very high signature radiuses compared to other enemies, so you'll be hitting them just fine anyway. So if this rock wasn't there, the Triglavians themselves might have yeeted themselves out of bounds as well. This happened to me quite a few times. It's of course very nice because it saves you some time killing them. But we weren't that lucky this time. Oh well. I know that they're in a white cloud, so they'll show up next to me soon enough, which means it's not really worth the effort reloading to barrage right now. I'll just sit on the gate and wait until they are out of the cloud, and here they come. You don't see me doing much manual piloting in these rooms. I usually just go from extraction cache to extraction cache. If you find yourself having to manually pilot a lot to avoid the damage, to have better tracking, lower angular velocity on the enemies, etc., that probably means that you need to update your fit or your skills because you don't want to waste too much mental capacity on doing this. This should be as easy as farming havens in nullsec. Just put another billion or so in your fit and save yourself a lot of trouble. Okay, here are the sleeper frigates. These are the ones that really enjoy killing your drones, even if I take all the wardens and upholders off the grid. So I have to pay extra close attention to my warriors. Other than this, this room shouldn't be a problem to you. Just kill the webbing first and oh, there's actually a automata suppressor. Oh well. I shouldn't be shooting the upholder. Actually, let me switch to hail. If you're running one tracking enhancer, you may wanna use fusion instead of hail here. But honestly, it's probably not a big difference anyway. It's not a huge problem. These drifter, or rather sleeper frigates are slow enough and big enough to where your 220s should hit them decently enough. I'm hovering over this to see how many enemies are neutralizing me. You sort of get a feeling for which enemies are the most dangerous with regards to neutralizing. These fire watchers and sentinels aren't that dangerous, and I also know that I'll be outrunning the sentinels any moment now. They are very slow, so I'm not worrying about my cap right now. Now, if there were a bunch of drifter cruisers, the dissipating ones, the energy neutralizing ones, in addition to a bunch of webbing stuff, then I would be a little more worried, because the drifter cruisers are neutralizing quite a lot actually. This Aegis here switched on my drones. I fortunately have a tracking speed pylon somewhere nearby, which means killing even the frigates will be fast. I don't even have to move. The... what is it called? Filament cloud? Well, whatever it's called, it's not great for our capacitor, as you can see. I'm not worried. I could always turn off the shield booster at this point. But yeah, it's not exactly helping. You can also turn off the afterburner, obviously. You can overheat your multi-spectrum if you end up in a situation where you're under cap pressure. There's a lot of stuff you can do to make your capacitor go a long way. Right now I have one of the event capacitor boosters for an extra 8%, so that also helps. Okay, next wave. It's basically the same wave again. Okay. Preservers are the ones... what? Oh yeah, capacitor is still recovering. Preservers are the ones that remote repair. You don't really have to kill them because you're popping enemies so fast they can't really apply any repair cycles. But for some reason I decided to start shooting one of them. I'll just switch to the wardens. They are the ones that will slow me down, so I want to kill them as fast as possible. Okay, we're still shooting barrage because we're far away. Oh, drones are under attack again. So yeah, this is why ideally you just shouldn't waste your time letting the wardens, the warriors rather, fly around, because it's just a pain in the ass and it distracts your attention. Oh, I had fusion loaded, interesting. I didn't even notice. Well, it just so happens to be one of the best ammos for this situation, so we might as well keep using it. Also, my warriors are being attacked again. Oh, probably gonna lose one. As you can see, it was the upholder that was trying to kill my drones there. Enemies that web or warp scramble are the ones that are typically switching on your drones. So maybe one word on the booster usage. Um, it's a balance between running the Abyss safely, but also not spending too much money on it. If you run some cheap boosters that have a long duration, it's almost always a pure plus, but you shouldn't overdo it. I wouldn't use a dose 4 Pyrolancia here, for example, even though it would speed up my times and increase my income a little bit, and it would also obviously make the run a little safer because I can get rid of dangerous enemies faster. It's not really worth the investment. You want to still make some significant profit. Some fits also rely on boosters to actually function in the first place. It's an okay situation. You shouldn't let it deter you, but it's also somewhat annoying because the boosters have side effects. If you get the wrong side effects, you have to switch clones, switch back to your clone, eat another dose, and then see what happens. Oh well. Okay, so I'm running these gammas back to back, which is what you should be doing because it improves your ISK per hour. This is the Ephialtes room. How many confusers do we have? Confusers are the ones that tracking disrupt, so I'm going to kill them first. This room can take quite a lot of time simply because there is quite a lot of HP for you to chew through. So if you spend 5 to 6 minutes in this room, it is what it is. If you spend 7 even, there's unfortunately no cheat code to do it faster. There's also 2 null warp cruisers. I'm not too concerned about them. This blue cloud actually helps us because these Ephialtes cruisers are surprisingly small and fast. They're harder to hit than Triglavian frigates even. So having them in a white cloud is beneficial. Let me switch to Hail. There's only 2 confusers left, and their tracking disruption isn't actually that significant compared to Triglavian tracking disruption, so I'm not too worried. I'm actually going to sit in this blue cloud for a bit and kill off some of the enemies because the tracking advantage is actually very useful here. And I only have to go back to the bioadaptive cache, so whatever. Once I've killed all the spearfishers, I can probably let my drones help me a little bit. So without the blue cloud and the signature radius increase, my Hail might actually struggle to hit these Ephialtes cruisers. If you aren't webbed down, you can just kite them a little bit to reduce angular velocity and hit a little bit better. And you can always switch to fusion. Although I don't like switching to fusion here because there is a lot of HP to punch through. So ideally you want to be shooting Hail. Okay, most of the enemies are dead. I've started moving towards the bioadaptive cache. My warriors aren't being attacked for once, so that's good. On the other hand, they've barely managed to half kill one of the enemies, so the extra DPS here isn't that significant. Let me slow down a little bit. These guys go 1k a second. Woo, apparently they can go faster. I was thinking that's weird that these are lagging behind. Usually the Ephialtes are fast enough to keep up with you. And that's when they probably turned off their micro warp drives or whatever it is they have. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, Damavix. So here's a room that potentially could be dangerous. There's a bunch of ghosting Damavix here. And they're already on top of me. There's 3 tanglings. Okay, so this is where we reload to fusion. How many tracking disruptors? Only 1 for now. This is where I overheat, and I have half an eye on reloading to, rather eating my drop booster. Let's see how quickly we can get rid of the ghostings. Oh, it's only 2 left. Okay, okay. So this wasn't dangerous, but there could have been more ghosting Damavix, and also, as you can see, my tank is a little bit on the iffy side. Checking the oh, it's the reason I killed them so fast is probably because of the pylon. So I got lucky here. Without the tracking pylon, this would have been a serious situation, but as you see, it's not quite. So the damage ramps up quite high with Triglavians, especially with Vedmax, especially if you can't kite them. The Vedmax only have 30-kilometer range, but you won't really get out of it unless you're flying a micro warp drive fit. Actually, I'll probably want to overheat soon on this guy. Yeah, let me just kill him real quick. Just to be on the safe side. So there can only be so much on grid. It's either the damage that is scary, or it's the tracking disruption, or it's the energy neutralizers, not all at once, because there simply isn't that many enemies. But with Triglavian rooms you have to figure out what the biggest threat is and eliminate that if possible. Okay, actually, let me switch to barrage now because I'm kiting them. Usually the Harrowing Vedmax should be able to keep up with me, but they themselves aren't too keen on coming in too close for some reason. Let me drop drones since there are no ghosting and anchoring anymore. Yeah, so as you can see, the Vedmax can keep up with an afterburner fit, but they still try to keep at range a little bit, which makes it possible to kite their damage sometimes. If you kite out of, I think it was 30 kilometers, they lose their spool. It might actually be 20, I don't even remember. So yeah, as you can see, about half the time we're shooting barrage simply because things are far away. That is why you ideally want to have as much fall off as possible. But on the other hand, you cannot afford to have too little tracking, because if you end up in a situation where you don't have enough tracking, with 425 autocannons in particular, then you're in big trouble. As you can see, my warriors are having huge fun with the white cloud. Fortunately, we are nowhere near the boundary, so they will not yeet themselves, but they are also mostly useless right now. As you can see, they are missing half the time. This is the reason why you don't use drone ships like Agila in Dark Abyss, because your drones have reduced targeting range, or rather reduced weapon range, and they aren't hitting anything even without white clouds involved. Okay, Angel Room. This is fairly easy. I'm in a white cloud, so I have to decide pretty quickly where I go. I also immediately reload to Hail because they don't have any tracking disruption and they will orbit very, very close. We're killing regular signables first, then elite signables, and then everything else that webs us. Usually capacitor is not a problem, but you should pay attention to it because the signables in particular do have some energy neutralizers. If you end up having trouble with capacitor, turn off the afterburner, turn off the shield booster, overheat your shield hardeners. If you have blue pill and you need it, eat the blue pill or the mind flood, depending on what you feel more comfortable with. And overheat your guns to take some neuting off the grid. In this particular case, we aren't worried about the newts, so we're killing anything that webs us. Also, angels really love switching to your drone, so I'm not going to drop my warriors in the first place. I just know that they're gonna get eaten anyway. Okay, since I'm webbed to all hell, I won't even bother with the other extraction cache. I'll just go to the biocache. These Ixions do missile disruption, but they do not do tracking disruption, so with a turret ship they aren't actually particularly dangerous for once. The only annoying thing about them is that they orbit at a quite long range, so hail doesn't apply quite as well to them as it does to all the other enemies. Okay, we still have the Echo. The regular Dremiels, I think, should also web you. Let's try dropping the drone, see what happens. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think I might be able to get away with getting the other extraction cache while I'm shooting. Although honestly, it's not really worth it. I don't want to be kiting the Ixions and applying less damage to them. I'll just sit on the bioadaptive cache and kill everything, and then call it a day. Okay, so now that the webs and scrams are off grid, now that they're all dead, my drones seem to be safe against angels. Oop, that was our Pyrolancia, which means we've been at this for an hour right now. I will probably dock up, even though I still have one. I'll just do the other one. I'll just do the other Gamma. Might as well eat the other Pyrolancia as well. Okay, so this is the dreaded Edencom spawn. We only have one Thunder Child. This could have been much worse, but also for the Vagabond, we aren't actually that scared of this spawn. There aren't even any webbing enemies. So what we do against Edencom is we overheat our afterburner and we just pick a random battleship and start shooting it immediately, and we orbit it. If there's webbing enemies, you can choose to get them off grid as you're approaching as well. But in contrast to micro warp drive ships and slower ships in general, our speed reduces the incoming damage from these Edencom enemies by a significant amount, so we aren't that scared of them. That said, if you get slowed down, if you end up in a blue cloud that increases your signature, you should be ready to go balls deep on your tank, because the thermal damage cruise missile from the Edencom marshals in particular really hurt. So this is a wave where you have to sit up straight and pay attention to what's going on. Try not to get webbed, try not to get into a blue cloud, try to fly fast until you reach them and kill them fast. At least the battleships. Everything else that's on grid shouldn't be a big problem. One word on the Stormbringers and Skybreakers is that they do friendly fire, so any enemy that's within 10 kilometers of you will get damaged by them. You can use that if you want, but generally speaking, I just take them off the grid first so that their chain lightning doesn't kill my drones. It's up to you if you want to use it. It's just a nifty little trick to maybe get the room done a little bit faster, is use the Stormbringers and their damage to help you damage down the other enemies. Okay, what is this? Oh, the Abyssal Overmind. So the Stormbringer has huge problems with this room because the Overmind has a lot of effective health, but with a Vagabond I am not concerned. I'm just picking up all the caches. The Overmind melts very quickly to hail, and the supporting drones, we can just kill them as we're collecting stuff. The one thing that is notable about this is that the wrecking shots from the Overmind, as well as other battleship-sized enemies in the Abyss, the wrecking shots, which is a 1% chance to occur, will always hit you, and they will do quite a lot of damage. So if you hear the shield alarm ring on this room, that's because the Overmind got a wrecking shot in on you. It's not a big deal generally, they have a slow fire rate and your shield booster should be able to recover this without an issue. 2 wrecking shots in a row would of course be a problem. I'm not hitting the drones very well, let me switch to fusion. 2 wrecking shots in a row would be quite annoying if you didn't manage to repair your shields in between. But it's generally not as dangerous as it sounds. It's a bigger problem for ships that have an even smaller buffer than the Vagabond. They might bleed into armor from just 1 wrecking shot. So this is one of the rooms where your warriors can actually do some significant good, which is you just send them on the Overmind once all the webbing frigates are gone, and the Overmind generally doesn't switch on drones, even though it has a webifier itself. So you can start having them nibble on the big potato while you're still clearing the room and looting everything. Actually, let me get the biocache first, because it's next to the Overmind and I can get a couple of good hits in. As you can see, the Overmind is webbing us. This is not a huge problem, but it makes it difficult to orbit him and chase him into the correct location, which is close to the gate. Ideally, what you want is to position yourself so that the Overmind is between you and the gate, so that it starts moving towards the gate, so that you end up closer to the gate. It's not a big deal in the Vagabond, but it's still a little bit annoying that I'm barely any faster than the potato. Ideally, you should not be double clicking into space. Ideally, you should be using Q to fly to a certain position in space instead of just flying infinitely in one direction. And the reason for that is if you have a disconnect and you've double clicked into space, your ship will fly out of bounds and die. If you hit Q and you tell your ship to go to a certain location, you can quickly log back in and your ship will still be in that location. I've had a couple of close calls. Fortunately, whenever I had a disconnect, I was either sitting on top of the gate or flying towards an extraction cache, or in one case I was double clicked in space, but I was webbed down by a bunch of angel NPCs, and so by the time I came back my ship was still there and I finished the filament with no problems. We're herding the potato towards the gate. It's probably gonna be dead quite soon actually, so let's actually move to the gate instead. Okay, so this is the last room. These drone battle cruisers, they have very short range, under 10 kilometers, but they also hurt very much. And they are some of the enemies that will gladly switch on your drones and kill them, one-shot them in fact. So the way to deal with them is do a little bit of manual piloting, do not come closer than 10 kilometers, or else you will get wrecked. Kill the tackle, as I'm doing right now, kill the field weaver, which is the remote repairs. The white cloud is bumping me off of the extraction cache. Great, thank you very much. I hate white clouds so much. Alright. So like I said, just don't fly right smack dab in the middle of them. They will overwhelm your tank and they will kill you. Just stay at 10 kilometers or so. Also, I'm not even launching my drones in the first place. It's a waste of money. As you can see, our cargo hold is almost full. It's okay to drop some of your ammo to... Which one do I jettison? Yeah, I guess this one. It doesn't really matter. It's okay to jettison some of your ammo. It's also okay to jettison crystalline isogen because it has the lowest ISK per volume, generally speaking. But of course it would have been better if I docked up before this filament and got rid of all my loot. In general though, you want to run 3 to 4 filaments at a time, because docking up, unloading your loot and loading stuff back up, ammo, etc. It's all time that your boosters are running and you aren't making any ISK. So try to get used to running several filaments in a row, 3 to 4, until your cargo hold is full. Okay, we're very close now, switching to hail. I'll also drop my warriors. You will see that now that I'm close to these things, my tank actually starts noticing it. I'm not too worried, I can always burn out of range, but I would rather not have any nasty surprises. Okay, at this point I'm just keep at range 12 kilometers. Oh, and I'll also pull my drones, because if one of them switches on them, they'll be dead immediately. Okay, so I guess that's it for this video, whatever it ends up being. I hope you learned something. I hope I didn't bore you to death, and I also hope that you will make a lot of ISK using the advice I gave you. See ya.